I have finished the analysis of your competitor's script. I've noted their pacing, their use of clinical psychological descriptions, like the reference to anorexia, and how they contrast the glamour of the monarchy with the brutality of the children's reality. I am ready to craft a superior, more haunting version for Macabre Mysteries of America. I will ensure the narrative is tighter, the imagery is more visceral, and the emotional weight is focused on the tragic destruction of the imperial bloodline. I will now begin writing part 1 of the script. As a reminder, I will spell out every number, date, and age, and there will be no headings or instructions, only the pure, voiceover-ready narrative. The glittering halls of the Hapsburg palace were never a sanctuary. They were a gilded cage where the echoes of weeping children were muffled by heavy velvet curtains. We are told the story of a fairy tale empress, a woman of incomparable beauty and grace. But the history kept within the shadows of Macabre Mysteries of America reveals a much darker cost. For Empress Elisabeth of Austria, known to the world as Sissi, perfection was a religion, and her 4 children were the unintended sacrifices on her altar of self-obsession. The tragedy did not begin with a single death, but with a slow, agonizing erasure of a mother's presence. Imagine being a child, barely 3 years old, standing in a vast marble corridor, reaching for a woman who looks like an angel but treats you like a ghost. Elisabeth would vanish for 2 whole years at a time, fleeing the suffocating etiquette of Vienna, leaving her offspring to be raised by a cold, strict grandmother and a father who saw sons only as soldiers. When she finally returned, the reunion was not one of joy, but of terror. Her children, Rudolf and Gisela, did not run to her with open arms. Instead, they recoiled. They wailed in fear because the woman claiming to be their mother was a complete stranger to them. This was the first fracture in a foundation that would eventually crumble into madness and blood. While the world envied the Hapsburg crown, the children within the palace were learning a bitter lesson. In the eyes of their mother, they were not individuals to be loved, but burdens to be escaped. As the children grew in the shadow of their mother's absence, a new horror took shape within the palace walls. Emperor Franz Joseph wanted a successor carved from iron and gunpowder, ignoring the fact that his son, Crown Prince Rudolf, was a fragile boy of delicate health. At the tender age of only 6 years old, the boy was ripped away from his sister and handed over to a man who believed character was built through trauma. Rudolf's education was a descent into a waking nightmare. He was forced to stand for hours in the freezing snow and ice, his small body shivering until it numbed. He was taken to the imperial hunting grounds and exposed to the charge of wild boars, a child facing down tusked beasts for the sake of courage. But the most sinister cruelty happened under the cover of darkness. To cure him of any perceived cowardice, his tutor would wake him in the middle of the night by firing pistols next to his head. It was an education of pure, unadulterated fear. While her son's spirit was being systematically broken, Elisabeth was thousands of miles away, drifting across the Mediterranean. When a confidential report finally reached her, detailing the systematic torture of her son, she did return to dismiss the tutor, but the damage was irreversible. The boy who could have been a visionary leader was now a hollowed-out shell, haunted by the sound of gunfire in his sleep. And yet, even after saving him, Elisabeth could not stay. The call of her own reflection was louder than the cries of her children. She fled again, leaving Rudolf to navigate the cold heart of the empire alone, while she turned her attention toward an obsession that would define the rest of her life, the preservation of a beauty that was already beginning to rot from the inside. To look at the Empress was to see a woman at war with her own biology. Elisabeth transformed her private chambers into a laboratory of vanity, where the pursuit of a 40-centimeter waist became a slow-motion suicide. She was a woman who stood 5 feet and 8 inches tall, yet she forced her weight to stay below 110 pounds. In every palace, the sound of music was replaced by the thud of gymnastics equipment. She would spend 3 hours every single day in a trance-like state, while a servant braided her ankle-length hair, a mane so heavy it caused her constant migraines. Her diet was a macabre ritual, drinking the raw juice of pressed beef and eating nothing else for days at a time. While she starved herself into a ghost, she looked upon her eldest daughter, Gisela, with a cold, judgmental eye. She despised anything she deemed common or overweight, projecting her own disordered mind onto a girl who only craved a mother's warmth. At only 15 years old, Gisela was traded away in a political marriage like a piece of unwanted furniture, sent to Munich to be rid of the reminder that the Empress was aging. But when a fourth child, Marie Valerie, was born, the pendulum swung from neglect to a suffocating parasitic devotion. Elizabeth called her the only one, openly admitting that her other 3 children meant nothing in comparison. She dragged the girl across Europe, from Rome to the edges of the sea, using her daughter as a human shield against her own loneliness. Marie Valerie became a prisoner of her mother's world-weariness, forced to listen to the Empress's dark thoughts for hours on end in total silence. It was a cycle of emotional destruction that ensured no child of Elizabeth would ever know the meaning of peace. If you find these hidden histories as haunting as we do, make sure to subscribe and join us for more at Macabre Mysteries of America. The pressure of the Hapsburg crown finally proved too heavy for a bloodline thinned by neglect and trauma. Crown Prince Rudolf, the boy who'd been woken by pistol shots, could no longer quiet the sirens in his own mind. In the winter of 1889, at a remote hunting lodge called Mayerling, the cycle of violence reached its bloody conclusion. Rudolf took the life of his 17-year-old mistress before turning the weapon on himself, ending the line of succession in a spray of lead and shattered glass. When the news reached Elizabeth, she did not weep as a mother. She collapsed as a martyr to her own grief. She traded her colorful silks for heavy black veils, wearing nothing but the color of death for the final 9 years of her life. She became a wandering specter, a woman who had abandoned her children in life and was now haunted by them in her mourning. The end finally came on the docks of Geneva in September of 1898. An anarchist file, sharpened into a needle-like blade, pierced her heart so cleanly that she didn't even realize she was dying at first. It was a fittingly sharp end for a woman who had lived a life of such jagged edges. As she took her final breath at the age of 60, her daughters felt a complex wave of emotion that few could understand. A sense of profound loss mixed with a terrifying relief. The only one, Marie Valerie, finally stepped out from the suffocating shadow of her mother's love, while Gisela remained a stranger to the woman who had birthed her. The legend of Sissi lives on in paintings and films as a story of romance and elegance. But the truth remains etched in the broken lives of her 4 children. They were the casualties of a woman who conquered the world with her beauty but lost the war for her own soul.